Hi everybody, this is Bill from AT Makers. Merry Christmas and welcome to a short video on how to adapt toys. Now in this case, I'm not talking about particular toys. I'm not talking about a My Pal Scout. I'm not talking about any particular toy. I'm talking about the toy that maybe your child wants. I'm talking about an unknown toy that where you're going out and you're looking for something for a particular kid. You don't want to start with the list of 5 or 6 toys that are easily adapted. You want to go out and find something that's right for this child. So it's more of the general guide to how to adapt toys. I think it's a good time to do this. It's about 2 weeks before Christmas. There's one weekend before Christmas. So I thought this would be a good time to pull together a quick video, show you some ideas about what works and what doesn't, and let you get to it this weekend. So let's get started. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on how to make the jacks that you're going to need. We have a video that does that. I'm also not going to spend a lot of time teaching you how to solder. There's videos we have and others have to do that. This video is mainly going to focus on how to find the switches, how to find where to connect to them, and then how to actually make the connection, how to choose where to connect into the toy in a way that doesn't break the toy, allows it to continue working the way it originally functioned, and that's easy to use and gives access for your child. When you look at the My Pal toys, like this Violet here, you'll see she actually has 4 separate buttons, right? She'll wake up and learn your kid's name. There's 4 separate buttons here, and so she's not a simple toy. Some of them also have a button in the center and things like that. But it is easy to get access to the switches. So if you look, each of these switches is in a paw, and there's 2 wires in the paw that you can actually open this puppy up and get access to them. So the most important thing is, can you easily get access to the activation switches? Once you do that, you can wire them up like we did here. All 4 buttons come out to switches, and it's fairly simple to do. Another one of our favorites, is the fart gun. This is probably my favorite toy to adapt, and if you can't figure out what to get your kids a fart gun. It actually has 1 switch right here that's very easy to get access to. It has 2 wires in it. When you hit it, it makes the appropriate sound. Another nice thing is it's not as simple as it seems. It's actually got another a gag mode where if you hold this down and wait until it lights again, right there, it will now wait for, I think, 60 seconds after you give it to your mom or whatever else. And it will go off again. This is a great gag. It's something that most parents don't know is in there. And if you teach it to the kid, they love being inappropriate. Okay? So you don't have to go for the world's simplest toy. You do have to go for the toy with the simplest switches. Here's another toy that I'm going to try and adapt today. We're going to do this one here. This is actually a hashtag the Panda doll from The Tonight Show. I got it when I was up in New York at the Tonight Show store. It's a great example of something that you're not going to find instructions on, but if you have somebody who is a Jimmy Fallon fan, this might be a great toy. It has a single button right here. And what's really nice about it, and I noticed it in the store, is you can actually feel the wires here in the hand, exactly where you're going to have access to them. And here's a toy that's probably not your best bet, especially this close to Christmas, if you want to adapt something like the Talking Tom. So this is a toy that was an app from the App Store, and they came out with a physical toy. And there's a lot of reasons why this isn't the right toy. First, it does have a button here that you can actually get into. It's a physical button to turn him on and off. But he has a lot of other things going on. The first is pretty obvious. If you turn him on and then you talk, he actually will repeat what you say. And he'll actually move his mouth. So he is probably not. There's a lot of functionality here that isn't easily able to be pulled out to the switches. Either the child will enjoy it without the switches, or it's not the right toy for your child. The other problem with him is that in addition to the basic switch, he's also got capacitive touch on his belly, makes him purr, and another one on his foot makes him laugh like he's ticklish. These are all just things that are not make him not a good toy to adapt. You can't get access to the capacitive touch purring or tickling spots. He's got another one if you hit him. There's a lot of things about this toy that make him something that is not good to adapt. Not because he's not a great toy, but because he's not a great toy with available switches. In all these cases, our goal is going to be to provide an alternative switch to the one that's already on the toy. When we talk about an alternative switch, we're talking about running a second switch in parallel. That means is that if you look at the circuit below, the current is going to leave the batteries on the blue wire, go up through a switch, and back to light up the LED and back. So if you think about this on the toy we're talking about, this might be an activation of a sound, it might be a bubble blower, whatever it is. This is the basics of what we're talking about modifying. And what we want to do here is we want to have another path, like this one, that says, okay, in addition to having the current switch working, we're going to have an option that runs the current outside of the toy to an AT switch and back in so that we have a second path for that current to flow. Now, this may sound complicated. It's really not. This is about as simple as you can get, and I'll show you on two different toys here how to do it. So let's take a quick look at the hashtag Panda Bear and how we're going to adapt him. Now he's got a single switch in this arm. As I mentioned, you can feel that there's two wires going up his arm right here. I can actually pinch them and grab them. You probably can't see that. But what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to open him up right here at this seam and have access to those two wires. And then we're going to take the two wires off of our jack and we're simply going to splice them in parallel to those two wires. And so it's important to understand the reason that this works. The current flows up into his hand to the switch, and when that switch is pressed, the current flows back through and signals the toy to play. What we want is we want to give an alternative path. So in addition to going up through the switch, we want the current to be able to go out through this wire, down through our switch, and back. So basically we have two paths here so that both of these switches will continue to activate the toy. For stuffed animals, you're going to need a few implements of destruction here. You're going to need probably a pair of scissors, a seam ripper. You can get this at Joann's or any fabric store. I seem to always need a pair of pliers, so I have a pair of pliers. And then you'll also need more wiring kind of things to do the actual hookup. So let's go ahead and open this up. If you've never used a seam ripper, I'll try and zoom way in here. And I'll probably speed this up as we go. But it's pretty straightforward. You simply use this to pick apart the seam. Remember, you don't need to completely take his arm off. We just need to get access to those two wires that run up into his arm. As you can see, we've opened up this seam right here, and as expected, there's two wires. It doesn't really matter which one goes out and back. This is a basic switch. So we're going to tap these two. I'm going to basically run the yellow off of one of these wires and run the green off of the other. One big tip here is that you should only cut one of these wires at a time. That way there is no way to wire them back into themselves, which is fairly common. Here we're going to cut and strip the first wire. It's pretty straightforward. We use a wire stripper to do this. The right kind of wire stripper can make a big difference, but you need to figure out which one works for you. I like this one in particular, especially on the very thin wires. Now we'll twist on the green lead from the jack. Don't forget to add a piece of heat shrink tubing. Twist the wires together. And we will solder them to make a good electrical connection. I prefer a lighter to a heat gun. And the second wire proceeds the same way. So at this point, our 2 wires up to the hand are still there, and we've also tapped those 2 wires here to go into our jack. So the first test is, does the original switch still work? It does. Second, we take our jack and we go ahead and put in our switch. Don't be surprised if it triggers when you insert it. With that connected, when we hit our switch, it should activate the toy. So the last step when adapting a stuffed toy is to find out where you want your jack to come out. Now, in reality, it might have been easier for us to have inserted these wires up into the arm first, but there's plenty of room in this toy, so it shouldn't be a problem. So we're actually going to open up a hole right back here by his tail, and then we'll fish this back out through it, and we'll sew the 2 up. Here, the seam ripper really is your friend. If you don't have a seam ripper, you just go to the store and spend the $1 or $2 to get one. If you're going to do any kind of sewing, it's a necessity. I've seen people try to use needles and things, but you just get poked. So go ahead and buy your seam ripper. And this hole is just about the right size for what we need. Now we just insert the jack into the toy. We'll have to kind of push it through and wiggle it down to the hole. Remember, it is a stuffed animal. You can squish it, and you're not gonna break anything. Generally, isn't that hard. We'll pull this through and make sure that our wires pull out cleanly. Try to pull them all the way through. Sometimes you have to pull them one at a time in order to get them to kind of go all the way in, and we want to clean that up nicely. Go ahead and tie this in a knot since we have that luxury, and give us a little bit of a ability to shove this back in here, give a little bit of strain release. Sorry, hashtag. And now we just need to sew up the 2 holes, and this toy is adapted. And yes, I can sew, but I cannot thread needles because I'm old and have bad vision. So I use a needle threader. No picking on my sewing. It is not my strength. We'll clean up his underarm a little bit and sew this up, and we'll be as good as new. And there you have it, right? So you have a toy that we started with that was completely not adapted. He still works, and as you'll see in a second, he now has a jack on the back, which will work through this switch as well. So here I'm going to take apart the fart gun, and I'm not going to go through the entirety of the details of this. I just want to show why the approach we just talked about works on this one as well. And now that we've got this thing opened, you'll see that it's fairly simple. It's got one switch, which actually triggers right here. And when this pulls back, it triggers that switch. So this switch right here is it, and these are the two wires that we need to have access to. Now, a lot of times you're not going to want to pull out the switch and have to put it back in. These are all it's kind of hairy to do that. So you'll notice that these two blue wires actually track all the way down the length of the toy. So we can actually access them anywhere from within here. We can tap off the two wires we need. So in this case, we'll take our two wires, pull them out, one here, one there, and all we've got to do is exactly the same operation we did on the stuffed toy, which is to tap our jack into these two wires that go to that switch. One of the things to think about here is, how are you going to get the jack out? So in this case, there's a great spot right here on this plug. So we're going to actually drill out a hole and push this jack through that hole. And I'll do that off camera, but that's just drilling a hole, pushing this in, and then using a little bit of super glue. All right, so our jack is wired up, ready to be installed right here. And we've cut and stripped these wires. Now remember, the goal here is that in addition to wire flowing down the blue through the switch and back, it's now going to have the option of flowing down the green to our jack, out to our switch and back, and then back the yellow to the other blue wire. Same tip applies, only cut one of these wires at a time, and it's easier to see what you're doing here, but it's the same basic premise. So we are going to cut a wire, and we will strip it, and I probably will just use my fingers to strip this. When they're really thin wires, that's probably the easiest way to do it. We'll solder this up. Apply our heat shrink. And do the same thing on the other wire. Some more wire soldering. And we are done. Before we reassemble, we need to make sure that both switches are still working. And that one is. And now we'll plug in our switch to our jack. That's a good sign. Put the switch in. Lovely. Here's the finished product. As you can see, the switch is still active, as is the adapted switch going through the jack. I hope this helped you in your quest to find the perfect toy as Christmas approaches. If you have any questions, you can always reach us at the Facebook group, ATmakers, or atmakers.org. Register if you got a toy you're having trouble with. Let us know. We'll be happy to help you, or find a local STEM program who can help you. And if you need ideas, we got a great set of toys. I'll provide a link down here as well for things we've already adapted and that are known good. I hope you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, joyous Kwanzaa, and a wonderful holiday season.